I hope you heard there, we were just speaking to an unlucky flyer in Gatwick. She's very much hoping that she's going to get onto a flight soon. But just describe the chaos.
Yeah, it's just absolutely awful. And it's not just any Friday. This is the busiest day for passengers flying out of the UK that we have seen for 5 years, since before the pandemic. It's absolute peak weekend. We were expecting there to be quite possibly problems, but mostly to do with air traffic control. And instead, we've got this meltdown, which is already leading to many, many cancellations across the world. And it's very easy, actually, to say what Stephanie and everybody else in her position is entitled to. They are able to get onto the next flight that's available going to their destination. Doesn't matter which airline. The airline that cancels your flight is supposed to actually pay for the flight. That probably won't happen, but you can buy it and then claim back. And while you're waiting, the airline that cancels your flight also has to pay for accommodation and meals. But it's an absolutely miserable start. I'm looking at a whole list of cancellations here in and out of London Heathrow, the UK's busiest airport. We've got Edinburgh, a couple of Amsterdams, Berlin, Zurich, a couple of those. Atlanta on Delta, New York on Virgin Atlantic, and up at Luton, things aren't particularly great. Flights cancelled to Athens and to Warsaw. And while it's quite possible that most people, I hope, will get where they need to be today, the big problem is that if you don't, even though the law says, right, somebody's got to get you a flight, there simply isn't the slack in the system. Everything is working at absolute full tilt.
Goodness me, Simon, it does seem like this is the worst time for this sort of meltdown to possibly have happened. As you say, the busiest flying day of the year. What have we heard from which airlines are most affected and which airports are most affected?
Yeah.
Does it seem to be random or is there a pattern here?
Right, OK, so all the airlines have now put out statements saying that they are being affected by this, but it's a very tricky system. I mean, you've been hearing from tech experts. It affects everything from online check-in, which many of us are absolutely used to, and indeed on Ryanair, Europe's biggest budget airline, you have to check in online or you face a £55 penalty when you get to the airport. They've now said, if you can't check in online, don't worry, we're not going to fine you, just check in at the airport. Baggage systems aren't working, flight dispatch procedures for different airlines aren't working. All of these things are possible and safety has never, ever been threatened. But the trouble is, we're so used to living in this modern world that things just take much, much longer when you have to default to the old analog way of doing things. And that's what's causing the hold-ups. Add to that some air traffic control delays. And very sadly, it's affecting all airlines. But if you take the two biggest UK airlines at their biggest bases, and that's British Airways at Heathrow, EasyJet at Gatwick, that is where I'm expecting to see the worst problems, not necessarily because they are especially kind of locked into this software, but simply because there's, if I can characterize it like this, Heathrow is the busiest two-runway airport in the world. Gatwick is the busiest single-runway airport in the world. And as a result of that, when things go wrong, they unravel very quickly.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon Calder. You paint a bit of a bleak picture, but let's hope these flights can get going very soon indeed. Travel correspondent for The Independent, Simon Calder. Do let us know, have you been affected in one way or another?